It feels like the wellness and biohacking world has found a new universal solution almost to everything. Want to lose weight? Peptides. Want to sleep better? Peptides. Want faster recovery after workouts? Peptides. Less inflammation, better skin, better focus, better libido, and ideally maybe slow down aging a little bit too. Again, peptides. If you open TikTok, Instagram, or basically any longevity podcast right now, the word peptides comes up almost as often as collagen or Ozempic did not that long ago. And by the way, Ozempic is a peptide too. Kind of funny, right? Today we are going to break down what peptides actually are, why they work, where all this hype came from, and most importantly, why taking peptides without medical supervision is more dangerous than it seems. If we simplify it as much as possible, peptides are short chains of amino acids, and amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. But if a protein is like a long, complicated sentence made up of hundreds of amino acids, then a peptide is more like a short phrase, sometimes very short. What makes peptides interesting is that they often work like signals. That's why sometimes they are called signaling molecules. Some scientists even describe them as informational messengers. They literally tell cells what to do: repair themselves, divide, produce collagen, regulate appetite, sleep, mood. And once you understand that peptides are signals, the next idea seems obvious. If the body uses these signals naturally, maybe we can send those signals ourselves instead of waiting for the body to do something on its own. We step in and tell it: recover faster, burn fat, reduce inflammation, fall asleep quicker, produce more collagen. It almost sounds like a biochemical keyboard for the body. But the body is not a keyboard, and pressing one button doesn't always lead to only one predictable effect. Actually, let's use a simple example here. If a peptide is basically a signal that triggers a reaction in the body, then right now I'm giving you a very straight signal to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Because unlike random peptides from the internet and underground labs, this signal completely safe with a very predictable outcome. You just won't miss the next video. What's interesting is that peptides are now being presented as this ultra-modern biohacking technology, but the idea itself is actually very old. Peptides were first discovered back in 1902 by Nobel Prize winner Emil Fischer. And here is the funny part. Peptides used to be widely available even decades ago. In the Soviet Union, you could literally buy some peptide-based products at a regular pharmacy and spray them into your nose. No injection required. One of the most famous examples is Semax. Scientific reviews describe Semax as one peptide with nootropic effects that was studied in the context of learning, attention, and memory, or as TikTok would probably call it today, brain drops. And in medicine, one of the most well-known peptide drugs is insulin. It's been used for more than a century, which is actually a very good example of the fact that peptides are not just trendy supplements, they can also be life-saving medications. And this is where it becomes important to understand what the peptide market looks like today. Because at this point, it's no longer just medicine. It's a full-scale wellness hype cycle with aggressive marketing behind it. For example, several bloggers I know personally have already received sponsorship offers to promote peptides, which honestly says a lot about the scale of this trend. And it's important to separate things like GLP-1 or semaglutide, a genuine medical breakthrough for people with diabetes and serious metabolic disorders, where treatment happens under medical supervision. But at the same time, there are now an entire wave of newer peptides, BPC-157, MOTSC, and other being marketed as universal solutions for everything: recovery, fat loss, longevity, performance, even though many of them still don't have clear long-term human data behind them. And the reality is, even clinics and specialists are still learning how to work with these peptides. In many cases, we genuinely do not know what the long-term consequences may look like in 10 or 15 years. But peptides already treat this as it's a fully established, proven practice. And in the gray market, unclear sourcing and influencers are making money from peptide sales, and suddenly you get the illusion that everyone is doing it. But if someone doesn't actually have a real medical reason to use these substances, and the goal is simply faster results or glow up, then maybe it's worth asking yourself, do you actually understand what you are getting into? The biggest peptide trend of the last few years has been injectable peptides. They are everywhere now. Fitness communities, anti-aging clinics, longevity podcasts, and increasingly regular social media trends. And there are really two very different categories here. First, there are peptide medications with clear medical indications. And then there is the new wave of wellness peptides, compounds people often buy through questionable clinics, online pharmacies, or directly from the internet. In 2026, the American Medical Association publicly warned that many of these new injectable peptides are not FDA approved and simply do not have the same level of data on dosing, frequency, or long-term safety that exists for insulin or GLP-1 medications. But in wellness culture, peptides are often described as something harmless, like, well, they're just amino acids. And that's an extremely dangerous oversimplification, because insulin is also a peptide hormone, which makes one thing very clear. Peptides can be very powerful, and powerful doesn't automatically mean harmless. The biggest problem with the current peptide boom is not that peptides don't work, it's that the market has moved faster than the science behind them. Many of these compounds are now aggressively sold for purposes that still don't have enough human research. Some are even sold with labels like for research purposes only, while people are still buying them for personal use. In 2026, Reuters reported that the FDA was reviewing access to several popular peptides because some had already been restricted over concerns about insufficient research, possible toxicity, and contamination risks. In simple terms, many of these substances now exist in a legal and scientific gray zone, and people often don't fully understand what exactly they are putting into their bodies or how safe it actually is. Some of the compounds being discussed were also widely promoted in wellness and biohacking spaces. So, whenever you see a peptide online promising recovery, fat loss, longevity, focus, or some kind of upgrades, there are a few important questions you should ask yourself. Is it actually approved for human use? For what condition? In which country? In what form? At what dosage? And who manufactures it? Who verifies purity and quality? Are there actual studies for this specific use case or just a beautiful theoretical mechanism? And maybe the most important question, do I even need this at first place? And are there any contradictions people conveniently forget to mention? Now let's talk about the newest peptide strand, sublingual peptides. In other words, peptides that are placed under the tongue. Right now they're being marketed as a more convenient alternative to injections. No syringes, no fear of needles, no worrying about travel or storage. You just place a strip or a lozenge under your tongue, it dissolves and supposedly goes into your bloodstream. And honestly, it sounds very appealing because it seems to solve one of the biggest problems in the peptide world. Most peptides don't survive oral digestion very well. Inside the gastrointestinal tract, they can be broken down by enzymes and stomach acid. And many of them also struggle to cross biological barriers effectively. So, sublingual delivery sounds like a clever workaround. There are actually blood vessels under the tongue that allow certain substances to enter the bloodstream faster. But that doesn't mean that peptide in sublingual form will suddenly become effective or predictable. A lot depends on molecule size, formula stability, delivery technology, and many other factors. And this is exactly where marketing often moves faster than science, because accessibility doesn't automatically equal proven effectiveness, especially when the compound itself still lacks solid clinical evidence. Another huge category is peptides in skincare. Our favorite wellness queen, Hailey Bieber, was already ahead of the trend and launched peptide skincare a while ago. And she is definitely not the only one. Rihanna with Fenty Beauty, Kim Kardashian with Skin by Kim, even Scarlett Johansson and her brand The Outset now have peptide products. But here's what's important: we really shouldn't throw all peptides into the same category. A peptide face cream and an injectable peptide drug are not the same thing. In skincare, peptides are used as active ingredients that may interact with the skin. For example, they can help stimulate collagen production, support the skin barrier, reduce sensitivity, or influence facial muscle activity in a much milder way than Botox. One example is Adrenaline, which is often called a Botox-like peptide because it's used in products targeting expression lines. But it works far more gently and much more superficially than injectable neurotoxins. And peptides really have become a major category in cosmetics. Industry reports now list hundreds of cosmetic peptides, each marketed for a specific function: signaling peptides, remodeling peptides, muscle relaxing peptides, anti-inflammatory peptides. But there are two important caveats here. First, just because a product contains peptide doesn't automatically mean you'll see dramatic results. Concentration matters, formula stability also matters, packaging, penetration, and of course the combination with other ingredients also matter. And second, cosmetics are not supposed to claim that they treat diseases or systematically alter the body. So if a peptide cream promises to restore youthful cells, that's marketing. But if it talks about supporting the skin barrier or reducing the appearance of wrinkles, that's a more realistic claims. So peptide skincare isn't necessarily a scam, but it's also not magic. There are active ingredients whose effectiveness depends on the specific molecule and the formula itself, not just the word peptide printed on the package. If you zoom out and look at the peptide trend more broadly, it becomes very obvious why it's growing so fast, because it taps directly into several modern fears and desires at once. We no longer just want treatment, we want optimization. We don't just want to avoid getting sick, we want to be more energetic, younger, and more focused. We want to control the body precisely without completely changing our lifestyle. And peptides fit perfectly into that dream because they sound scientific enough to feel trustworthy, but simple enough to feel accessible. They are marketed almost like a language you can use to communicate directly with your cells. And honestly, that's a very beautiful metaphor. But the problem isn't this. If you don't actually understand the language you are speaking, you may end up sending completely wrong messages. And things become even more complicated and riskier when peptides start being used on a someone recommendation basis. One person injects them for recovery, another for weight loss, another for sleep, another for libido, and then someone else builds an entire peptide cocktail. But the body doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like a restaurant menu where you can casually order less inflammation, more energy, and a little fat burning on the side, preferably with no side effects. The biggest risk of taking peptides on your own is not necessarily that they are automatically dangerous. The biggest risk is unpredictability. You may not actually know the real purity of the substance, the correct dosage, where it came from, and how it was stored, whether it was mixed properly, whether it's sterile, what the contradictions or how it interacts with other substances. And if we are talking about injections, the risks become even more serious. Infections, incorrect injection technique, injection site reactions, allergic reactions, and many more. If the peptide is hormonally active, it may affect the endocrine system. If it influences appetite or metabolism, side effects may involve your stomach, blood sugar, and blood pressure, or other metabolic processes. And if we are talking about nootropic peptides, this situation becomes even more complicated because it affects your brain. And honestly, right now, the peptide market still looks much more like a large-scale experiment than an established therapy. If you're wondering how to distinguish an actual medical treatment from biohacking hype, the difference is actually very simple. In medicine, a drug starts with an indication, not a promise. There is a specific condition, a clinical purpose, and data behind it. But in biohacking culture, the order is often reversed. First comes the promise, then the personal testimonials, then a beautiful, scientifically sounding mechanism, and only somewhere at the very bottom, In tiny letters, you find the disclaimer, not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. The deeper you go into the world of peptides, the clearer it becomes why there is so much hype around them. Because peptides really are one of the most fascinating classes of molecules in modern medicine. Peptide-based drugs have already changed the treatment of diabetes, obesity, and certain rare diseases, and the field is still evolving rapidly. In skincare and cosmetics medicine, peptides have also earned their place as active ingredients. But precisely because peptides are real and potentially very powerful, they shouldn't be treated like just another casual wellness trend. Peptides are signals, and interfering with the body's signaling system without proper understanding, diagnostics, or medical supervision is a very questionable idea. Now I feel that it's a perfect time to go and watch another crazy wellness trend, and that's your cut for today.